a guy at one of my signings the other night says, "You know, your books are like plays," and I took that as a great compliment, because I do think about book structure and scene structure, and I keep very careful count on scenes. I do not like, although there is some hop around stuff in my early career, I've come to loathe it, and I really keep the point of view very controlled and the scene count down, so that scenes come out. They
do. I mean, we can look at this book physically. You know, it's not one of these giant bloat.
It's 400.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a good.
It's an
size.
easy 400, though.
But it's well, I wasn't thinking of easy, but you can just sort of tell there's some books that just look leaden before you ever pick them up, let alone open the pages. So there you are. But I think you do brilliantly. Tell me, why is Vienna one of your favorite cities? I have a really mixed reaction to Vienna.
So do I. But that makes it one of my favorite cities. It's changed a lot in the last couple of years because of the opening of the East. So they have tremendous amounts of tourists coming from the other direction these days. Buses and buses and buses from the Balkans and East. And so I love the center. I love the architecture and the streets. I can just wander around there. But as I put in the words of Gabriel Allon, it's a city of ghosts as well, and it has this terrible history. So for me, it's also impossible not to walk the streets of Vienna and think about what happened there in March 1938. It's also difficult to go to services on Friday night, you know, within a couple hundred yards of the great cathedral, and have to pass through a couple rings of Israeli security to go into a synagogue because of the anti-Semitism there. I did a lot of research. I talked to some people that work inside the community, trying to better relations between the two sides. And it's a real threat. It's not something to sneeze at. And I said, who's doing it? Who makes the threats? Who does the violence? Who does it? And they looked at me as if I were crazy, and they said, neo-Nazis, of course. So I have mixed feelings about the place.
You know, I find the weight of empire presses upon it. It's a very grandiose city. It reminded me a bit of Buenos Aires in the sense that, you know, there's a lot of imperial buildings.
Definitely.
And it has great museums, and I had a fair amount of free time. We actually ended up staying there longer than we had planned, and to my great distress as an opera fan, we were there in the only month the opera house was dark, which I considered to be God laughing at me there. So I wound up in a lot of museums, and tremendous whole tracks of uniforms and things, you know, all these trappings of the military and of imperialism, and there's even like a continuously running film of the Franz Joseph's funeral, and, you know, the whole Habsburg thing was fascinating to me.
Well, I mean, it was a great power that fell apart.
Absolutely.
You know, it's not I did a bit of research on just the history of Austria. It's not a cohesive country in terms of its origins. It was people from here, people from there, and so I think there's a kind of a mixed up identity about what it exactly means to be an Austrian, and that comes through. But there's still, happened to be there on their National Day while I was doing the research, and they had a big military show in front of the Parliament building, and here's a country that I don't know when the last time their soldiers were on any battlefield, but boy, were they in love with those guns and tanks and airplanes. It was very interesting to watch. And
uniforms, no doubt. I can't tell you how the uniform, I mean, what a deal that was. Of course, Vienna's also the home of Mozart, and, you know, to me, the music just is so omnipresent. I mean, call me shallow if you want, but if I could wave my hand and like restore anybody who died to life, Mozart is my man. I just can hardly stand the thought that he died. So just as some of this incredible music was beginning to flower, you know, I hear the magic flute and I just want to scream that there's no more.
He left us with a lot, though.
He did, but, you know, I just can't, I'm so curious about what could have happened, you know. Well, he was a man, I think, on the cusp of going, and I mean, he was not a static kind of musician. He didn't just, and it's just, you can hardly imagine how music might be if he had lived long enough to express some of those ideas, and yet, you know, he might have just, that might have been it. I mean, he
His
may
talent depresses me, actually. I mean,
Yeah.
just to think of someone so unbelievably gifted.
Do you remember the movie Amadeus?
Sure, it's one of my favorites.
There is this incredible moment, I think, and I'll never forget this, where he is standing there in the midst of familial, marital, and professional chaos, and I think he's at a billiard table, and he's rolling.
And he's writing.
And the music, and you know, if you actually look at autographed manuscripts by Mozart, they're one draft. There are no corrections, no strikeouts, no amendments, whatever. And I always think, you know, that he really was taking dictation from God.
And there was that
really
fabulous
heard
scene
it.
where Salieri was looking at the sheets of music, going, where are the other drafts? Where are the other ones? Where are the other ones? I love that film.
Me too. He must have been impossible to live with, because he was an interior, you know, he has to have been hearing that interior voice all the time. It's probably why his life was so chaotic otherwise.
I think most artists are probably impossible to live with.
Yeah, but he had the misfortune also not to marry somebody who could really look after him, and I think there was a whole combo. There's a very good book out at the moment by Stephanie Crowell called Marrying Mozart, about his whole history with the Webern family and the Webern sisters. He kind of got to Constanza by default. And it's, I think it throws some, well, we're going far afield. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I just, you know, Vienna, Mozart, there I am. So where is it you think you're heading? Are you taking Gabriel into yet another book?
I'm taking him into at least one more book.
Cool.
I need to resolve a lot of threads about the story. And after that, I'm really not quite sure. I have some books I want to get to, books that wouldn't be Gabriel books, but I certainly wouldn't want to forsake the character.
Oh, no. Oh, he's so wonderful.
He's been
now.
very good to me, and we've been good to each other. And he and Shamron, Ari Shamron, I love them, and so I think that whatever I do, you know, maybe would I alternate or try to write maybe a couple books a year? I don't know, but I do have some other things I'd like to get to.
When you thought about Gabriel, was the idea that his wife and child, you know, were victims of a terrorist bomb always there, or was that something you came to?
It was always there because I learned some lessons from the Osborne series, and that one of the lessons I learned is that it was very difficult to have a man of the secret world married, and I thought I could do it, and it was fine, but I think that ultimately the genre almost demands a single man, but I didn't want to turn him into these, you know, typical guys who are getting all the girls all the time and sort of thing. I didn't want to. I don't like a lot of romance in my stories. I don't like that canned romance that gets thrown into every single plot where it has to be a girl, and in chapter 22 they have to have lurid sex. Those scenes always strike me as so silly, and so I looked for a way to deal with it, and that was the way I did. There are some scenes. The scene in which Gabriel sees her in The Kill Artist is probably one of the favorite things I've ever written, because, like in all such situations, he thinks as a restorer and how he would like to be able to heal her as though she were a painting. So it was the way that I chose to make him human, to have a real love life and married life, not some sort of made-up fantasy spy life, but to move her off the stage. And I think it worked, actually.
I think it works very well. I think he's a very tragic figure, but at the
He's definitely a tragic figure.
As you say, it's made him connected, and yet at the same time, because they're dead, it makes him kind of the ultimate risk taker, because part of the deal of he doesn't really care.
She's alive. She's alive, actually, and that she is hospitalized in England.
Oh, that's right. She's in the coma.
Yeah,
And it was the child that died.
So it adds this other element to his.
Will she ever wake up?
Makes it, well, no. But I'm going to involve her in the next plot.